Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just giving everyone an opportunity to get in and get settled. Hi, everyone. So my name is Nicky Hylton Patterson, and I'm the director for the Adirondack Diversity Initiative. Thank you for joining us. It is part of a lovely day. I'm sitting in my office with lights coming through, so I hope that it's not a horrible look, and you can still see me and see what I'm doing. Thank you for joining us in the second episode of our Anti-Racism 101 series. And so what we're going to do today is, before we start anything, I just want to thank the people. Do we have? Can you mute your microphones for me, please? Thank you so much. We're happy to have children with us, but we want to make sure that our microphones are mute. And I just want to remind you that throughout the first 25 minutes of our session, you can go ahead and upload your questions or comments to the chat box, and we will we'll check them and try to respond to as many of them as possible, but we only have an hour. Okay? Before we get started, I would like to thank the people who made this possible, made it possible for me to be here, for us to do.
I'll plan on being back.
Could you mute your microphones, please? I hope we don't get hacked, okay? But we're gonna press forward in hopes that we don't get hacked, because we are using Zoom. So I'd like to thank Governor Cuomo. I'd like to thank Senator Jose Serrano from the Bronx. I'm a member of his district, but I'm an Adirondacker now, so it's bye-bye, Senator Serrano, but we still love you because you, yourself, and Senator Todd Kaminsky, Assemblyman Stephen Engelbright, Senator Betty Little, Assemblyman Dan Steck, and Assemblyman Billy Jones are only just a few of the people who quietly work unrelentlessly to make sure that programs like ours get funding. I'd like to just give a big shout out, if nothing else, to our governor, who has been very outspoken about naming systemic racism. And that is where it all begins, is to name systemic racism and name the institutions that continue to oppress Black people, African Americans, people of color, and First Nations and Indigenous peoples in our country. And so I wanna thank you all. Thank you all for the work you're doing, for standing in support and continuously funding these projects that are doing the work to make a more just and fair society for everyone. Before we get started, I just want to again talk about some incidences that have happened in our community here, Saranac Lake. When I got here, people like to talk about Saranac Lake as the blue dot in the sea of conservatism, right? However, recently there was some racist graffiti. And it's interesting how the news portrayed the incident of the racist graffiti. They call it inappropriate graffiti, inappropriate language that said, "Go back to Africa, you N-word." For me, that's not inappropriate, that's racist. And so that is one occasion where that kind of targeted language is targeting "Go back to Africa" is obviously anti-Black, and it's obviously directed at the Black folks and African Americans in this community. And so I'd just like you to note that this is going on in our community. And so just quickly to talk about, every now and then I'll bring up, we need to, as we're talking about reconstituting our society, addressing inequities, I like to bring up the role of capitalism and making capitalism more accountable. And so thinking through, I got a question today. One of the questions that we got, someone asked us, "I understand that you're talking about diversity, but what does that diversity, diversifying Adirondacks, mean to my property value?" Right? So out of everything, when we asked them to submit questions to us, that's what they wanted to know. And you know what? That person was being honest. How is diversity going to devalue his or her or their property? Right? So this is where a lot of your community members are. right? And so he was honest, and so I'm bringing it up because I'm not going to respond to that question, but I would like you to know that this is how people are thinking about diversity in the Adirondacks. So let's do a quick recap of where we were, talk about the goals of the session. So the goals of the session, and these sessions for which we have three more. So we have 2 more sessions, 2 teach-ins that are going to be facilitated by our white male and female and gender non-conforming or gender non-binary accomplices in the community, all female, all male, gender non-binary sessions. Then we will have a workshop, an anti-racism workshop, where you will get to go into breakout rooms and learn how to turn intent into action. And this is going to be on July 27th, but if you want to see the entire series of events, please go to the ANCA website or to the diversityadk.org. And that is the Adirondack Diversity Initiative. But I also, as we're moving through, I'm gonna thank my core team. I'm gonna thank my ANCA family, who for me have been my front and rear guard. So the minute any, I have been threatened. All kinds of wonderfully, horribly things have started occurring since we've been speaking out against anti-Black racism and racism in this country. And so the ANCA family have been my front and rear guard, and the core team, the Adirondack core team, if you want to know who they are, I don't want to mention names and forget any of these precious people. Please go on our website, diversityadk.org, and look them up. They are members of different organizations and agencies, and they have been quietly, relentlessly doing this work. They're outspoken and committed accomplices, and I thank each and every one of them. But so to return again, as I said before, to the goals of each session, the goals of our Anti-Racism 101 session is to provide you with the language, tools, strategies, so you understand how to educate yourself, what you need to do to move from actor, ally to accomplice, and how to make change. Make systemic change, not just sentiment, but action. Recently, so I'm going to share my screen with you for a second, folks. Give me a moment. So I'm asking my our admin assistant here to give me host sharing capabilities. One moment. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to quickly recap where we were at the beginning. So we started, the last session was anti-racism checklist for white allies. We posited some definitions of racism, prejudice, white supremacy, white privilege, implicit bias, anti-racism, anti-Blackness, anti-racist allyship, and we talked about what allyship meant in terms of definition. I'm not going to return to that for this session. What I will do is ask you to go to our website at the end of this. We'll have all of those posted within 1 or 2 hours after this program. But today what we're going to focus on is is looking at specifically what it means to be an actor, ally, and accomplice within an anti-racist framework, right? As we were developing and designing this forum, my panelists and I decided that recognize that we're missing a piece, and that piece is accountability. And we needed to understand, what does it mean for white people and non-Black communities of color to be accountable within the framework of being an actor, ally, and accomplice. And the fact that accountability, as I'm going to posit a definition, or we're going to define for you, is an essential component, right? It's a necessary ingredient for you to be able to develop, for you to move from intent to action within the framework of actor, ally, and accomplice. Okay, now as we're going, I'm going to reintroduce our panelists, but I want to remind you that we're only going to be speaking for 25 minutes, and then we're going to take your questions. So I invite you to upload your questions and comments. The rule of law, or the rule of thumb, is to be gracious, to be respectful, and we will respond to as many questions as possible. Thank you. So One moment. So with us today, I would like to apologize on behalf of Dr. Michelle Cromwell. She is the VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at SUNY Plattsburgh. She was unable to be with us. She sends her blessing and her love and her accomplishment, right? Because last week when we met, she said she doesn't want any ally. She wants an accomplice. An accomplice is ride or die. An accomplice will stand with her and go through the trenches. An accomplice will speak up and push for systemic change. And so we miss her, but we know she wanted to be here, but she couldn't. And she will be with us on July 27th when we have the workshop. And so there will be breakout rooms, and she will be in one of those breakout rooms. We also have among our panelists, we have Dr. Nicole Horsley. Dr. Horsley is an associate professor at Ithaca College, and we thank her for being here. We also have Clifton Harcum. Clifton Harcum is a diversity officer at SUNY Potsdam. These people are amazing, amazing activist scholars, grassroots activists who are in the community doing exemplary, awesome work. Clifton lives here in Saranac Lake, just around the corner from me. So he heard about and had the same reactions to the graffiti telling us to go back to Africa, right? And that we are the N-words, but you know, hey, it just means that we're doing the work. And I want to tell the people who wrote that is that we are not afraid of you, because those who are with us are greater than those that are with you, right? And so as we are doing these workshops, we are building and educating people so they can come along as accomplices. And so we're building up our rear guard. So you keep doing what you're doing. It just means that we are doing the work that we need to do. And we are not your Negroes, as James Baldwin would say. So we're going to keep doing what we're doing. So I would like to welcome our panelists. You're looking at your screen and you're seeing the word anti-racist. I want to play a video from you from The Guardian. So let me minimize this because I feel that this powerful Jamaican guy speaking from The Guardian did an excellent job of talking about what it means to be non-racist versus anti-racist. So please, let's take a moment.
And anti-racism. So I have a question for you. Are you non or are you anti? Several months ago, in response...
It's not sharing. Oh, stop. 1 moment. Sorry, 1 moment, folks. Let me share this again. All right, here we go.
So I have a question for you. Are you non or are you anti? Several months ago, in response to Ferguson, Baltimore, the killings of Freddie Gray and Tamir Rice, my friend Caitlin put up of us are non-racist.
Powerful message from my Jamaican brother. And I love that he was using a clip in the background where you see the Black queer people. That was Jamaica. And I want you to all know that it's still gay and lesbian queer people like myself are persecuted daily, on a daily basis in the paradise that is Jamaica. So I just want you to think about that. But he ended with talking about white people being accountable. And so we want to start there and talk about what does it mean? What is accountability? And what does it mean in the context of anti-racism? And how will it impact or influence your growth or your movement? Not linear, but your development from actor to ally to accomplice. All right, so I'm going to invite our panelists, Dr. M. Nicole Horsley and Clifton Harcum. Hi, how are you today? Clifton, I don't see our brother. Did we lose him? Hi, Clifton, I see you. Can you unmute yourselves, or do I have to unmute you? Yeah, I need to unmute them. Hi, Clifton. Dr. Horsley, can you hear us? Can you speak? Are you able to? Dr. Horsley?
Can you hear me?
Awesome. I apologize, folks, for the technical glitches. We just paid for the upgrade of the Zoom, and so we're still working out the kinks from 2 days now, 2 days ago. So why don't we start with just get a quick reflection of the video. He ended where we wanted to start with accountability, right? So before I even put up a definition that we sort of developed and came with of accountability, let's get your reactions on the video. Because we don't have like a whole lot of time, but we do want to process. Dr. Horsley?
Well, immediately I thought about Martin Luther King, right? There comes a time when silence is a portrayal. I also thought about Audre Lorde's, your silence will not save you. And so when I think about anti-racist work and what does that mean for non-black people, right, or non-people of color, white people, it's not about self-improvement work. It doesn't end when white people feel better about themselves and when it's done, or when black people, it ends when black people are staying alive, right, when we have liberty and justice. I think that becomes a part of what he was saying, how to put this into practice. And I think that's really important, right, because a lot of people, and I don't want you to feel pressed, or that if you're not an activist, you can't show up, right? And there's one, I will acknowledge, being in this conversation, it takes so much courage, right? It's courageous to be here and to listen and to start to understand what does it mean to be an anti-racist and how do I live an anti-racist life? And I'll let Cliff go.
Hi, Cliff. Thank you so much, Dr. Horsley. Cliff?
Yeah, Dr. Horsley, I think you summed it up perfectly. So for the sake of time, we can just move forward.
Okay, all right. So Cliff, let's start with you then. So I'm gonna put up the definition that we developed as a team on accountability. And let's talk, I want you to start us processing a little bit on what accountability means and what does it mean in terms of being an anti-racist, right?
Okay.
So let me put it up and then have you discuss. So here we have on the screen, and I'm going to remove it in a moment, but you'll be able to find it after our session, where it's white people and communities must be committed and hold themselves accountable. So we're using the word again, to people and communities of color, non-white, towards dismantling anti-Black racism. So Clifton, let's start there. Let's process a little bit. What is accountability, and why is it critical to being an anti-racism or living or developing as an anti-racist?
Well, the first part of being accountable is to acknowledge that there is a problem, that white privilege is real, and that those privileges give you access to a different lifestyle compared to other ethnic groups. And I feel it's important in your next steps is if you can't move forward if you can't acknowledge the problem. Now, with that problem, the action steps come into sort of some of the conversation we're going to speak about earlier, ways that you can be active by being an actor, or being an ally, or being an accomplice. But it first comes down to the acknowledgement that it is a problem with the system.
There is a problem. So accountability is intrinsically tied to acknowledgement. My challenge with acknowledgement is that white people and non-Black people of color and maybe some First Nations people get stuck on the guilt, that guilt, denial, and shame. Once you start being accountable and you start looking, you're accountable, so you're exposing yourself to knowledges and educating yourself. You can get bogged down by shame or racial fatigue. How do you move? Dr. Horsley, can you pick up, and then Clifton? Dr. Horsley? Can you unmute? Yes, Dr. Horsley?
Well, I think about all of this, right? Anti-racism, accountability, like it's not a checklist. It's not necessarily an identity practice. It's a practice, right? It's not an identity. And so you start by doing, and I know that sounds really simple, right, and simplistic, but it's you start by doing and thinking, changing the ways in which you see the world. Your heroes sometimes aren't my heroes, right? I think about Thomas Jefferson. He created, he said, all people or all men are equal. He was also a slave owner, right? And so in that instance, he's also kind of perpetuating this double kind of understanding. There's really this lie of what it means to be So when I think about accountability, I think about how how one can perpetrate and continue racism through everyday acts of violence that can be small and can be really massive, right? And one of those violences can be being silent. When I think about silence and how it has impacted the 4 places in which we named as a collective, right? The personal, the self, the family or home life, work or school, and also in your respective community, in this case, in your white community, how those then become a point of reference for you to then become accountable to yourself and to your community, right? And I'll stop there.
Clifton?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to one of the first kind of topics we're going to speak about later, that self-reflection, that white fragility, you know, moving past that.
Yes.
When it comes to accountability, and it takes more than just empathizing with Black people, saying, "Oh, I feel so bad," or, you know, I understand. You know, it moves past that to the action piece. But I think at the end of the day, it's really about that reflective nature of where have you participated, whether it's in your silence, and a lot of the racial matters that are taking place around the country and even in your own communities.
Yeah, and to what extent that silence is complicity. Okay, and I think a lot of times he said it very uniquely, and I can't stop talking about how he was pointing to the Jamaican LGBT movement, or lack thereof, and the silences around state-sponsored homophobia and things like that. So I'm going to move us along because that was my time. Because I want the audience participants. I'm not going to call you audience anymore. The minute you step into this forum, you are a participant. This is a moment. And so Dr. Horsley and Clifton mentioned that it's not static. It's not a location. It's a practice. It's a life. It's doing. And so I thank you for doing by joining us, and doing by educating yourself, by being a part of this forum. And so what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna share my screen again, and go back, because I want us to move through and not think of movement from actor, ally, and accomplice within the framework of being an anti-racist as linear, as movement, as static. It's a journey, okay? So what does that look like in spaces such as in your personal life, in your family, your workplace, and within your white communities? What does it look like, and what does it mean to be an actor, ally, and an accomplice, right? While taking onto yourself that accountability that we've been talking about. So let me share my screen, and I'm sharing my screen because I want you to see so these definitions were borrowed from whiteaccomplices.org, and so we're going to make sure that you have the links and any authors we talked about, any activists we talked about, any books we referenced. We're going to make sure that you have those resources, and we'll put them on the ANCA website as well as the ADI website. Okay, but I would like you all to please remember, as we're going through, we're going to stop in about we're going to stop in about 15 minutes and take 10 minutes and take questions. So please remember to upload your questions or comments, and we will get to those. And before we leave, I would like to just briefly talk about the next event, especially the Black Experience in the Adirondack series. That is a partnership between ADI, the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, ANCA, and the Adirondack Experience Museum. So what you're seeing now on the screen is a definition that we pulled from whiteaccomplices.org, and it's a definition of actor. So here, the actions of an actor do not explicitly name or challenge the institutions of white supremacy, which are necessary and meaningful for progress. This is a lot of words. Okay, so let me jump to you. I know, right? So let me jump to you, Clifton. Sometimes this stuff is esoteric and abstract. They don't have any meaning. What would this look like in your personal life then? Because we're looking at those 4 areas: personal life, family, workplace, and within your white community. What does it look like in your personal life?
Well, an actor is someone who basically kind of knows there's an injustice going on. They watch the news. They may say something to their family and friends like, "Oh, this is horrible." And and I don't do those things. And it's sad that I see this happening. That's really in all of those areas. You know, you might say, don't treat Black people bad. That's sort of like an actor role. But it's really just a witness that doesn't agree, but is not really putting any action on the actions.
Yeah. Dr. Horsley?
I agree. I think about maybe Cornel West, and he says what justice looks like is love in public, right? And so how can you show up or start to show up in this stage, in this phase of your life as an actor? Because it has to start somewhere. So it's kind of unconditioning or reconditioning yourself to start to see things that you've been conditioned not to see or feel or experience, right? To turn away from.
Yeah. I want to posit another add to that another sort of example in your personal life or within yourself is thinking about what he said, the difference between non-racist and anti-racist, right? So a non-racist is when I think of someone who says, oh, I don't see color, I don't see race. That's for me, I cannot accept that. I see race and I see color and it's glorious, right? I love hues and I love that people come and add to the complexity of life and the granularity of life. Now we have to decide what equity means so that we can all participate in this perfect union. And so that's what I'm thinking about immediately when I think about an actor. The person who, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You've been taught not to see race for a reason, right?
Right.
I mean, to not see it means that it doesn't exist, meaning that we aren't racist, and we need to retool that colorblind rhetoric. It did not work in the 80s, and it doesn't work today.
No. So, and you can ask your questions about that. So please remember to upload your questions. We're not going to give a whole lot of time to these definitions. We are hoping to turn this session. This is a teach-in. The last one was a listen-in, right? So this one is a teach-in. This is a moment for you to ask the activist scholars here. So Clifton, I'm sorry I jumped in after Dr. Horsley, but do you want to follow up from there about what the idea, what I just said about what I see is an example of in your personal life, not seeing race. This for me feels like an actor, right? An actor stance in terms of
that's pretty much, I don't see race, I'm okay.
I know, right? I don't see race. I try to treat people as I hope to be treated. You know, was it Shakespeare, and I keep talking about this, who said to thine own self be true? What if thine own self is a shitty bastard? Pardon my language. What if thine own self is nihilistic and has been beaten down by society so much that self is self-hate? So do you want that kind of treatment, the way you expect to be treated, you expect that of others? And so that's a longer discussion about the epistemic and psychic trauma, right? But that's kind of the way I see it. And I'm getting a little too academic here. So we're going to move on. We're going to move on to ally. And we have like just under 10 minutes. And so ally, you can read for yourself. Actions of an ally have great likelihood of change in an institution. Let's talk about and acts as like a disruptor in educational spaces dominated by whiteness. Let's talk about family. This is so we're focusing on 4 areas: personal life, as I said before, family, workplace, and within your white community. Let's talk about in a family. Dr. Horsley, let's start with you. What does it mean to be an ally, an anti-racist ally in your family? Oh my God, I keep thinking about Thanksgiving dinner, but every time I think about the family, I think Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah. What is it? What does that mean? What does it look like?
Well, it looks different for everyone, right? And I don't want anyone to really get caught up in labels and
Yes.
To really understand how these labels are being used to guide you to this kind of destination, as the quote says, right? But it looks different for everyone. But I think one way is a commitment to raising anti-racist children, being an anti-racist parent. And what does that really mean, right? There's so many texts, books, ways in which of being to show you how to show up for your children and also to teach them. Abram Cutie, he has a book, right? The anti-racist book also has one for children. So you can also have that journey or take that journey with your children. And also toys, right?
Yes.
You have to always kind of do this centering of white, blue hair, blue eyes, blonde hair, baby dolls, and different things like that. Be more conscious when you are actually, picking toys for your children. And also when you practice when you practice different cultures, and you talk about race, start to think and educate yourself. And if you don't know something, it's okay. You get to mess up, you get to make mistakes, and you get to come back to it to understand what it means to be an ally. It's something that you get up every day to do and to rethink, put a mantra up of some sort, but unpack that every day, what that means, that you're going to be a better person and show up for your entire community, which includes, right, non-white people in this moment or every moment.
Mm-hmm. Clifton?
Yeah, when I think about allyship, I look at it as a way of, understanding, because you've been through the active phase, so you know that you have privilege that minorities and particularly Blacks don't have, and using that privilege as a way to kind of support the people that you feel are being treated unjustly. So the allyship way be this thing about a protest. So an ally knows that, that privilege exists, and they know that their presence there will make a difference. They're in the front lines, they're marching, and they're using their privilege to kind of speak on behalf or speak with, like currently, like Black people out in the streets protesting. So that's kind of like my overall kind of understanding and definition of an ally when it comes to standing up for people of color or Black people in general. But it's a big difference compared to being an accomplice when it comes to that getting your hands in the mud.
Getting your hands dirty. That's so true. I recently heard a really great program on NCPR that was talking about the political hobbyist, right? And so when I thought about an ally, a political hobbyist will show up for a rally because it makes them feel good, and it's good for your social media feed. But what do you do after that? Do you know what I mean? What comes next? And I think I know Dr. Horsley says these labels make it, the journey, feel static and make it feel as though you have to come perfect, but that is not true. That is not the case. I am surrounded by anti-racist accomplice, and their entire embodiment is about learning, repositioning, educating, developing, decentering themselves, and being where I need them to be, not in an exploitative way, but in an empowering way. So they are constantly empowering themselves and empowering me to share my story and to decenter themselves. Clifton?
And one of the pieces of being an ally is understanding that you can't understand the Black experience. You don't know. So being an ally, it's appreciated that you're supporting us. We appreciate that you're there. But at the same time, understanding that it's opportunities to learn as well. And if you are wrong in a situation where you're speaking for allies and you get corrected by someone, and I guess in that community, you just be quiet and understand that you can't fully understand the experience, but you're appreciated for your efforts in being involved.
And we understand that it's painful. We understand that it's uncomfortable because you've given up power. Right? You're giving up power. And so if you understand, I'm going to throw out a name, Michel Foucault, and Bell Hooks, right? I'm throwing out names there, and Horton Stallings. I'm throwing out names when you're talking about what power looks like. Power doesn't always mean material power or political power, right? You have power in many different ways. And so it is understood that when you step up and determine that you want to educate yourself towards living an anti-racist ally or accomplice life, that you are making yourself uncomfortable. Okay? So I'm going to move us right along because we have about 3 to 5 minutes. I apologize, but I don't. So let's go share the screen because I want to get your voices in on this. So I'm sharing, am I sharing my screen? Nope, I don't think so. Let me do this again. Make sure I'm sharing my screen. There we go. All right. And I'm not talking to myself, folks. I have some wonderful people in the background here helping me to keep us going. So here we are. So we talked about ally, accomplice. Now, again, I would like to refer everyone to whiteaccomplices.org. I apologize for reappropriating your stuff, but it was so concise and precise and well done. And so, so I am borrowing and referring to the knowledges that you have spent so much time to put together, and it's so relevant in this time. Accomplice. The actions of an accomplice are meant to directly challenge institutionalized racism, colonization. And so that's another word that we don't have to often talk about, right? We know who, so as a woman in gender studies a student of women in gender studies and post-colonial theory and queer theory, I'm very, very familiar with colonization and decolonization and being raised by a Rastafarian daddy. You know, the anti-colonialist is colonialism is something I knew about before I could even say the word properly. But we have to talk more about colonialism, and we're not going to get the chance to do that in this. But the actions of an accomplice are meant to directly challenge institutionalized racism, colonization, and white supremacy by blocking and impeding racist people, policies, and structures. I want to also refer to D'Angelo's book, White Fragility, because she has a very, very concise and nuanced, granular definition of racism that will allow you to rethink about what it means to be a racist person, what it means to perpetuate and function in a system that is devotedly racist. But I want to refer you to that book. Let's start with Clifton. Clifton, what comes to mind? We have this definition. What are we talking about now? It's not a destination. We've been saying that. And these terms and titles, these monikers are not something for you to carry on like a wet bag of sand, right?
And when you think about these terms, they're more about how you act in your daily life. So an accomplice, they're willing to go down with the ship. You know, they're out there. If people are throwing stones, they're taking the stones as well. You know, when it comes to policies, if they see some policies that are inappropriate, they're at it trying to fix the problem. If they're owner of a chain of restaurants and they see racist practices, they're willing to take the financial hit in order to change things. An accomplice is along the lines of whatever happens to you is going to happen to me. And if we get locked up, we get locked up together. It's not, well, I see what's going on with you. I support you verbally.
Right.
They're going down with you, just like a crime. Accomplice, if they're there, they're guilty just like you are. So
what about in the workplace then? Let me challenge you, push you a little bit. What does an accomplice, anti-racist accomplice, looks like? If we're gonna try for an example of what the actions of an anti-racist accomplice looks like, even though I know Dr. Horsley doesn't like to use these terms or identities because they're static. I know she's shaking her head, but you're gonna get a chance to rebut. But let's focus on the workplace for a second. What would an anti-racist accomplice act or action look like in the workplace?
Okay, so you might have an example where you're in a staff meeting. You know, a lot of people can relate to that. And one of your colleagues says some racist, inappropriate words or say some racist things at a work meeting. The accomplice, they check that immediately, even if it's their supervisor. You know, they stand up and they say, this isn't right. And the whole idea about an accomplice is that you're going to suffer a consequence for standing beside and with and entangled with something that you believe in when it comes to especially dealing with Black people. So in the workplace, you might get written up for speaking up against racist behavior and actions that take place in the workplace. And that's a brave move to do, especially if your whiteness can block you from a lot of those problems.
Dr. Horsley, workplace, what does it look like?
Correction, I'm not against the titles, Nicole, Nikki.
Okay, there you go.
The thing is working in grassroots efforts, right? Sometimes we're in academia and we use like these terms and terminologies, forgetting that the people on the ground sometimes just do and be. They just react, they just move, right? It's about liberation, it's about getting free, it's about eating, about taking care of our kids, right? And so I don't want it to be intimidating to individuals who might say, I don't know, I think about my own family. They might not know what this means, right? But I think in the workplace, when I think about how someone can stand with me, I shouldn't have to be in the room for you to understand that, you know, there's no one that looks like Nicole when she's not here. And that point of view is important. And also that, you know, I'm just not here to teach the Black stuff, right? That there are Black people and other people who can also be hired and thought of throughout the institution. And so I think that's really important. I think anything around anti-racism, it's not going to be nice. It's not going to be friendly. It's work, especially when we're thinking about oppression, injustices, settlerhood, genocide, land dispossession. Nobody wants to give up, you know, what they have. It's always about the person, you know, crushing the person at the bottom. And while race is that kind of entry point for us here, when we're doing this kind of work, the social justice work, we don't just engage race alone. So we kind of understand how to think about race alongside an intersection or these kind of social constructs, right? So you might think about Black women missing, Black men missing, class structure, sexuality, ability, disability, as well as being indigenous, right? What does that mean when we're in this workplace? And how does this start to dismantle whiteness, white privilege, white fragility, white supremacy, which we all suffer from?
Yeah.
And really quick, while we're talking about work, and I'll be really quick with this story. Several years ago, I applied for a job in Pennsylvania, up in the mountains. Did really well at the final part of the interview. As a circle of people interviewing me, and they said, "You seem like a strong Black man. You seem like you're a strong Black man." Basically, I guess the whole point of it, they had some racial issues. So they said, "What would you need from us in order for us to support you here?" And I was shocked because I'm like, "This is a job. This is an interview. What do you think I would need?" I said, "Well, I would need y'all to have my back, just like you would do with any other colleague." I didn't get that job, but it said something about their mindset in that situation. They acknowledged that they had a race problem. They also acknowledged that my presence would be uncomfortable for a lot of their colleagues and employees. And they wanted to know what could I want from them. And I wanted the same exact thing that anybody would want. Someone to be an accomplice and check that behavior at the door if we're a team. So, you know, that's a real life situation I actually went through. And it was really disappointing that that question was asked. You know, I probably could have got some for discriminatory practices with that interview, but that's an example of when you say an accomplice in the workplace, what that really would look like. And that's a real example
Yes.
of a situation.
And reimagine, right, the next, what's to come, right? We don't know what the future is. So you get to reimagine with us together as a collective what that future might look like, what it might be, right, as a collective. A collective that addresses these problems. We don't know what 500 years is going to look like. We're not going to be here, but we want to make sure that our children, their children, you know, like have a future in which to get to. That's not Desmo as the moment really that we're living in. And it's been this moment. For some people, this is new. For some of us, this is so old.
Yes. This is tired. This is played out, and there are lots of moments or lots of minutes in the 24 hours that I'm like, whatever. This don't mean nothing. Everybody's gonna forget about this news cycle in another 14 days. Something else is gonna go on, and it's gonna be something else, and we're gonna go back to it. And there's a lot of window dressing that's gonna happen, and people are gonna forget that the governor mandated that the police departments restructure and rethink how they serve the community by April 21st, I think, you know, but we each yeah, go ahead, Cliff.
And I think that's one of the biggest concerns that, you know, I can't speak for the whole community, but that we have for the community, that right now it's the movie of the week and it's on everybody's mind. And once it stops getting plastered in the news cycle and dialogue on radio, then we go back to business as usual. And, you know, people, you know, appreciate the support, but is this really a change, or is it just the thing to do? Is it just a Facebook post, or is it something to seem that you're woke and you're accepting? You know, that's just one of the concerns in our community.
I don't even know what woke means. Just like how I don't know what it means to defund the police, right? And I actually don't know what that means. Even if you give me a definition of that, I understand what it means to revision or revisit or reinvent how the police or law enforcement works with communities of color, work with Black people, work with First Nations people, work with trans and gender non-binary folks or people. I can visualize that, but I need somebody to call, especially when this fool put that graffiti here in Saranac Lake about going back to Africa. Brother, sister, gender non-binary folk who put that up there, you would know more about Africa than I would, okay? If you're sending me back to Africa, I don't know where to go, because that history was removed. I don't have any knowledge of where to go in Africa. Let me not start on this forum here. But I'm gonna stop us if the panelists have nothing else to say, and just take questions. So I'm gonna turn over. I have 4 questions. Okay, so let me read the questions here. All right, let's start with, so you know the person who, remember I started talking about the property value? What does diversity mean to our property value up here in the Adirondacks? Someone sent me that email. So the person has identified themselves in the chat. I love that. Power to you. Bravery is what we're calling for. And this is his comment. I asked the property value question. I'm reading. Actually, I would expect the long-term effect on property values to be favorable. This is what the person says. The more people that are welcome to the Adirondacks, the better the tourism will be and property values would increase. It is an important question and something I would expect we would want to advertise that option, that opinion. Yes, we will do that. Yes, so if you want to come on board and help us to frame that how we are going to promote that, you are welcome to. And I encourage you to come along and help us to frame that and to make that public and make that known. And that's what it means to be an accomplice. So come on board. I will receive your email and call and we'll get to work. All right, next. This is from someone else. Nikki, as one former Bronx resident to another, thank you for help. To help us do the work. As a longtime visitor to Saranac Lake area, I'm grateful for the work that the ADI is doing. His question or her question or their question. Have you found similar organizations in other rural outdoors oriented areas of the nation we can look to, learn from, or help teach? We can build that resource, and I can ask my panelists, do we know of any other organizations that are doing similar work in rural areas in the US? Any comes to mind, or we can just build, we can provide that resource on our website. Thinking off the cuff. Anyone? I know right now, I think immediately I'm thinking of John Brown Lives, right? You want to educate yourself about the past so we can attend to the future. John Brown Lives. I know that there are many other organizations. Some of them are a little more political than others. But I have worked with, is it in North Country, Democratic Socialists? I've worked with them, and I found these people to be grassroots activists of incomparable reputation in terms of attending to anti-racism and anti-racism in the North Country. But I could name all of my core team members right now, and they embody the kind of work you want to see done in the rural. I'm talking about Pete Nelson, Willie Janeway, Callie Brooks, my CEO, Kate, my Anka family. I'm talking about, and I know Raul Aguirre. So these people are attached to all of these agencies. I'm talking about Chris Morrison, who is a staunch anti-racist accomplice and just does so much for us. And so these are only a few names, but they are attached to agencies that are doing incredible work, even though they are not explicitly anti-racist. But we will provide a list for you under resources on our ADI webpage. Let me move on. Somebody said they're not good, blah, blah, blah. And so here we go. What kinds of changes would you like to see happen in terms of police training? Woo. Panelists, I can tell you what I have done, and then we can springboard from there. So at the ADI, we've come up with a list of recommendations for the local police station. So I've already talked to chiefs, the chief of Saranac Lake, and chief of police of Saranac Lake, and the chief of police and assistant chief of police of Lake Placid, and both of whom are very receptive. And actually, Lake Placid, they've already started to do some internal work in terms of looking at their hiring practices and their community policing and so on, and put that on paper. But we're not at liberty to share that information at this point. But we've talked about de-escalation training. We've talked about the fact that there's no cultural consciousness or competency or what you would call equity and inclusion training after, not even an in-service for any of these two departments after they leave the what you call it, the academy. Okay, so you're talking about people who have been doing this work without any continuous development, right? We talked about walking the beat as opposed to driving these muscle cars around and around the block like I felt I was being profiled when I just got here. We've talked about mental health for the police themselves, talking about working, and I know, Clifton, you have done some work. You had done some work in Maryland with the police and the community. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what kind of recommendations you think would be comparable for our local police force?
Well, at one point I was working with Dr. Lorenzo Boyd and some other colleagues on that whole concept of community policing and creating sort of a model for policing in Maryland, in the area where I live at one of the colleges. I think Dr. Boyd, he had the best model. I don't want to speak on behalf of, what police need to do, but, some of the basic things, profiling. I've had my issues since I've been up here. I've had police follow me, run my tags, follow me for about 2 miles, and then tell me that my car was coming up stolen because I was driving a BMW, but it was my car. And I guess once he kind of realized that I wasn't a threat or I didn't have drugs, asked me if I had a warrant, those profiling things from my experience in this region have been pretty much. But from my experience with the police here, it's really just the profiling and understanding that just because you're Black doesn't mean that you are a drug dealer.
That's right. Or you were dangerous. Yeah, right? Dr. Horsley?
I think similar to both of you, right? Like, I want to know exactly what does that mean and what does that look like per wherever you go, right? I'm thinking about Oakland right now and what's going on.
You're talking about defunding the police, right? Okay.
Yes, and I'm thinking about Oakland and how they, have been successful in some of the measures that they're currently doing. But what does that look like and what does that mean for individual communities? I think about Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, right, who was patrolling. He wasn't a police officer, but he did this community patrol. And we see what that looks like. I think about Ahmaud Arbery, right, and how he was running through his neighborhood and the men thought that he didn't belong, and so they killed him. I also think about, these other instances where Black bodies just don't belong. And so how do you then make a system or people really think and not see danger when they see a Black body, right? And that's one of the places I think that we should start just for ourselves. Usually in classes, I'll start and I have students write down, everything they think about when they see a Black man, a Black woman, a white man, and so forth. And the things that they say about Black people as a whole are really just everything that's negative in the world, right? And sometimes I have a lot of Black students, they say that about themselves, right? And that's just how these visuals and how we've been socially constructed to see Blackness and anything that comes close to it. So I think that it's really important that we start with our institutions and education, and I mean education broadly, on really to rethink what it means to be a Black person in Blackness. Even the person who, even thought to bring capitalism into a conversation with race, right? Not really probably understanding that racial implications and how racialized bodies have always been capitalized. And the question about value for the community has always been a way in which to keep us out. White flight was the biggest thing every place you went to, right? They thought about their property value instead of imagining what that could look like if these communities were quote unquote multicultural and we understood each other and we prospered together, right? And so that, for me, that question, I would want to like even sit down with that person and do some work to see and help them understand how that question, you know, it can be, you know, but I truly understand where we want to get at, right?
Yeah.
But we have to think about some of the things that we connect to. There's a history, there's a lineage there that we cannot and ever forget. Forgetting means killing and dying. And that's the thing that I want. I want when I see a police officer, not to feel afraid, that I know that they're here to protect and to serve. Yes. And I don't know what that looks like. I want us to imagine that together as a collective.
Exactly.
And I want to give a quick example of that. You know, growing up Black and growing up as a Black male, when it comes to the police, you know, at least when I was born, you know, it might be different now, but you're giving instructions at home on this is what you do, this is what you don't do. I'll give a real life example from now, and I think these examples kind of show the different worlds that we live in when it comes to being Black and white. So when I get pulled over, if my wallet is in my armrest or in my glove compartment, I ask, is it okay? I need to get my wallet out of my armrest. I need to get my wallet out of my glove compartment.
Yes.
Because I don't want to be mistaken for reaching for a weapon. And
yes.
Like, so those are the type of things that if you don't live this experience, you won't understand. No sudden movements. And you might say, why? You don't need to do all of that. But
yes.
I do. Because
because we are just trying to live through the interaction. I said that and people thought I was crazy.
And right? If you believe it, go Google, what's his name? Philando Castile. Right?
Yes.
He's saying to the police, I have a gun, I have a license to carry, and we see him get executed in broad daylight in front of his girlfriend, yes. The child in the back, right? And so even after that, that's not enough, right?
So when you talk about what needs to be done with the police, it's just so much bigger than a training. It just really is. Just like the young man that is showing the videos now, and he was walking, so all the police on him, say he looks suspicious. The caller said he didn't have a gun. They said he wasn't. They don't know if he was doing a crime, but he got surrounded by police just because he was walking down the street in a ski mask. You know,
so,
and the approach is if he did do a crime. You know, and some people may say, well, he shouldn't have had a ski mask on, but he can wear whatever he wants if he wasn't a threat. So the bigger problem is what we kind of discussed in the first session is just the whole concept of white supremacy and white privilege, and every single thing we're discussing it's not a simple fix. And I'm very passionate about the whole concept of that self-reflection. I think that's where it starts. Recognizing that you have these biases.
Yes.
And these biases are real. Because if you ignore them, nothing's going to change whether you train or not.
I want to stop us because we have 18 questions that we haven't even gotten to. There's one, and I'm gonna paraphrase here. Someone said, how do I engage, hold on, let me see. I'm sorry, I'm going all the way back. How do I engage communities of color in the process of white, and in the process of holding white communities accountable without burdening Black people, Indigenous, First Nations people, and people of color? Does that make sense? How do you engage communities of color without burdening them to provide you with knowledges, basically? Yeah. We just don't have enough time for these, right?
Yeah, and a question like that is really educate yourself. You know, in the time of YouTube, Google, movies, educate yourself on the plight. A good series is pretty old. It's called Eyes on the Prize. It'll give you a great history of the Black experience in America from slavery up until, I believe, the 60s or 70s. And then just talk. It's really nothing special. You just have to have those conversations and be willing to understand that it's not going to be comfortable, that white fragility. You just have to put yourself in one of those awkward spaces where you're going to be challenged, you're going to be upset, you're going to be mad.
Awkward spaces. That is a key term. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you have to be willing to lean in and put yourself in those uncomfortable spaces. Dr. Horsley, I'm going to let you have the last word, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
Well, I think Cliff, said it, communication, right? Listening. You don't just come in and just come in and forget that the people are there and what they need and they know what they want. You ask them, how can I assist you? How can I be there and be an accomplice in this mission to get free? Because that's what we want to do. We want to be free. And I think that's the most important thing. And also, if you have funding and a budget, you pay people. Right, that's one of the most simplest things. You pay them for their labor, right? Because that's
Yes.
and it's a lot of anxiety goes into sitting in front of people and making them uncomfortable because people don't understand this is 500 years, over 500 years, right? KKK were the police, right? KKK were your neighbors. They were, like, so this ingrainedness, right? I mean, we were going to show a video by Dr. Joy DeGruy. She comes up with the theory about post-slave traumatic syndrome, right? And that means something that's DNA. We've been living in fear. You talk about you in fear. Black people living and existing in fear, and they do it to their children and their children, right? And that we don't even understand how to show up, that we've been living in so much fear. And then we're told that because we're Black and we're in these communities that have been shut down by white supremacy, we're inferior, we don't belong, we're the problem. And we've never, you can go throughout the history, you don't see Black radicals going around, they try to do that with the Black Panthers, right?
Yes.
The government completely took their programs, and that's how we have social services, right? But let the truth, speak truth to power is what I would say. But
Yeah.
listen and talk and go with, humility. Remember, we're human, and people don't think about that. What does it mean to be human for those that you consider to be objects or nothing, the nothingness of Blackness, which is violence. So what does it mean for us to be human and you to see us as human? I think that's really important.
Yeah. I don't often use that word human because so many of us have relied on others to categorize us as human or let us into what is considered human. So I prefer to use the word shared humanity, but I know what I will do is I never anticipated that so many people would have so many questions. We have over 25 questions here or comments. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our panelists. We won't be back as a team again with Dr. Cromwell until the 27th, when we will be doing active workshops, breakout rooms. So you can be in a room with each one of us, including Dr. Adam Dewberry, an amazing, radical, white male anti-racist accomplice who works here at ANCA, and he's going to be joining us. But what I will do is I will ask my panelists and Dr. Cromwell to respond to the questions. So we're going to do a little bit of work, nothing too detailed, but to provide responses to your questions. So give us a few days until Monday. If you asked a question or you made a comment that really prompts us to respond, then we will post it. We'll do it as anonymously as possible. We won't include your name. And respond to that. So you can look for your question and a response to your question, because it's just impossible. ADI is a team of dedicated core members, but we have 1.25 staff, okay? It's with me and Alexis Subra. Did I pronounce your name right? Alexis Subra, who does 10 plus 25 hours a day of work for us, okay? So she's supposed to only do 10, but this is a radical woman who's an activist in her own right and feels called to do this work. So 10 hours is we apologize for exploiting you, Alexis. We can never pay you for the work you do, but I would like to just speak their names. And I'm not gonna speak the names of our dead ancestors, right? The people who have been taken down and taken out in this moment, but I want to speak the name of the ADI core members who have loved on me and have supported me and are doing the work, and I want to call them by name. And so I'm speaking about Pete Nelson, Martha Swan, Raul Rocky Aguirre, Jen Kretzer, Paul High, Callie Brooks, Willie Janeway, Jacob Vinny Volrat, Kim Erlin, Kate Fish, Donathan Brown, and Cindy Rodriguez. And I would like to also thank David Kahn and his team at Adirondack Experience Museum. We're working with them to produce the Black Experience of the Adirondacks. You will hear more from Clifton and other activists and Black folks living in the community about Drive While Black, and making recreation, making the community more welcoming and inclusive, especially on those trails. Amen, brother. Especially on those trails and those peaks that you talk about, overuse of the peaks. Who is overusing the peaks? I'm sure you ain't seen no only but Black bodies and brown bodies and First Nations people over there overusing the peaks. And so I invite you to come along with us. The activities and the lists are posted on ANCA's website. You can also find them on the Antiracism Museum website. I thank you so much for being with us. Panelists, do you want to close with anything? Panelists? Okay, I guess not.
I'll just say something briefly. Hey, if
Go
if
ahead.
you really want to be supportive of the Black community, like I said, it's about the education, the self-reflection, the honesty with yourself, and making sure that you don't pass those bad ideologies on to your kids, because that's so important in changing how things are in this world.
Yes, we do have a program coming up, How to Talk to Your Children About Race. We still haven't populated that, but it will be on, I want to say July 15th. I'm not looking at our schedule right now. Let me pull up the schedule real quick so I can look for myself. Let me quickly go over our schedule so you can know when speaking to your children about race is going to be. So let me quickly give you, so we've got, this was the second in the series of Antiracism 101. The next one will be on July 20th. What does it mean to be a white male anti-racist accomplice? On Monday, July 27th, we'll have white female anti-racist accomplices speak truth to white power. And then on August 3rd, I apologize, I mixed both. August 3rd is the workshop, How to Be an Anti-Racist Accomplices. And you will be seeing everyone here, plus Dr. Dewberry. And then the Black Experience in the Adirondack series will begin on July 3rd. Dr. Donathan Brown, who is at the Rochester Institute of Technology, will be interviewing me, and that is live. That is live. All of these programs are live. On Thursday, July 9, also part of the Black Experience in the Adirondacks, which is a partnership with the Adirondack Museum and ADI and ANCA. On July 9th, we are the white community leaders, so you will meet the founders of ADI. Then on Thursday, July 23rd, Driving While Black, Part 1, I will be interviewing Dr. Gretchen Soren, who is the director of the Cooperstown Graduate Program, but also the author of the new book, Driving While Black. I will interview her and take questions from the audience. And then on Thursday, July 30th, Driving While Black Part 2, Clifton Harcum, our esteemed panelist here, will moderate a panel of 7. We have more, but we can't hold them all on one panel. In one panel, people in the community who have been profiled, their experiences with law enforcement while driving, right? And so we're going to do a series that's just for the teen voice. We have teens in our community who are mobilizing around that, and that will happen, and you will see it. We have so many ways for you to educate yourself. But then beyond that, we are going to ask you to take intent to action, and you will have many, many ways to act. Okay, and that's where we're going to separate the non-racists from the anti-racists. Okay, so thank you for your time. Thank you for participating in this moment. Dr. Horsley, do you want to say anything before I say ta-da?
I guess in the words of Alice Walker, activism is my rent for living on this planet. None of us are free until all of us are free.
None of us are free until all of us are free. Thank you. We'll leave on that word. You have a great day, and bless you all. Big up.